Hello, everyone, and welcome to AshaUSA's 2022 speaker series, Take Charge of Your Life. As you know, AshaUSA is a non-profit organization focused on promoting health and harmony in the South Asian community. In the last episode, we talked with Amy Miller about aging confidently, especially when you are a young person having a young family. What are some of the things that we need to consider, whether it is talking about healthcare directives or wills, and also how to start that conversation in the first place. So today we have with us Amy Miller again. Thank you, Amy, for joining us.
Thank you.
And as we said, Amy founded the Our Family Encounters program, and she has authored 2 books. Her first book, Last Life Lesson, a guide for aging adults and families, and her new book titled Aging in Place Conversations. So thank you so much for giving us valuable information in the last episode, Amy. And today we would like to start by talking about when we have this conversation about having a living will or a healthcare directive, how do we keep this conversation going, especially when it comes to our aging parents? What are some of the ways that we can make sure that communication stays on?
And this is, again, one of the hard conversations. One is that we talked about starting the conversation, but as we said, maintaining and keeping the conversation. So with many families, is there a time when you say, okay, we're going to have like Sunday afternoon, we're going to make sure we all connect on I'm assuming everyone uses Zoom to stay in touch with family members around the world, wherever you might be located. That's a great time to just stay in touch and have those conversations. Then the question becomes maybe not necessarily, asking point blank, Mom, Dad, what are you doing about, are you going to the senior center, or are you getting enough exercise? Those questions, or how did your doctor's appointment go? Those things may come up, but sometimes it's the things that are not spoken. So for example, maybe Mom or Dad comes to the phone and they just don't look like they normally would. Maybe they haven't had a bath in a few days and you can kind of maybe see that, or there's a lot of clutter and they've always kept their house really clean. Those are indications that things might not be as, it might be something new's happening. So that might be an indication to keep an eye on your parents. Another thing is, especially if you are local, this is a little trick, I guess you could call it, that I've heard, is make sure when you hug your family members, when you hug them, see if they've gained weight or lost weight. So that can be an interesting way to see if they're eating or maybe not eating. That sometimes is an indication that maybe they're going through, they've had some medical issues, and because of the cost of medical issues, they may not have extra money. So they might be cutting back on their food, or they're depressed and they're starting to eat lots of maybe unhealthy foods. So that might be a way that you can kind of gauge how is Mom or Dad doing. And then when you have those family gatherings, maybe gently bringing up a question of, Mom, when was, can you come over for dinner on, and you can have those meals together. But if you're, out of town, that becomes a little bit harder. How do you stay engaged and how do you help out when your parents are maybe showing signs that they're not doing as well? So having somebody local to, a local family member to kind of be sort of the eyes and the ears, the in-person contact is really important.
That's a very important point, especially as you know, most of the immigrants who are here, they still have their parents back home who are aging, and there might or might not be other family member living with the aging parents. And so that's a good idea to have either an extended family member who come and visits them on and off and keeps an eye, as you said, be the eyes and ears for you so that you can know how your parents are doing. Or it can be a friend. But from here, making sure that those networks are in place. So in case your parent needs something, or if they are not telling you, at least you come to know how they're doing. So
Right.
that's a very good point.
And I would just add that there's a lot of, and I don't know if I really get into a lot of detail about this, but ideas of there's a lot of people being scammed. And then also with the past couple of years, people have been told to age in place. And so they're not getting out, they're not involved in as many community activities, volunteering. And so that's caused a lot of people to really kind of go in on themselves, and they're not reaching out. So how do we keep people, our loved ones, safe and healthy and engaged, and having some joy in their lives? Because that's something that kind of disappears very slowly, and they may not be aware of it. In addition to maybe having additional health concerns, or just the basic health. I don't know if I want to go as far as saying disabilities, but they're kind of like a disability.
Yeah, and before we go into details about aging and other issues associated with it, I would love for us to again look at this timeline that you shared with us last time, and we talked about the young families, but let's look at the retirement piece here, the stage of life when people retire. Or let's say, 55 plus, that's the age when actually people start thinking of retirement age and, what comes next. So can you talk to us about these things that you have listed here that people need to be aware of?
Absolutely. And the conversation really does start around 55, because that's where you're probably putting away as much money as you can. When we think of Medicare, that's for healthcare costs. And those, at the age of 65, you need to have a Medicare, you need to be signed up for Medicare. So you receive those decisions, knowing what that is. There's whole classes on it. It's a very dry conversation, but when you're in a situation, it can be really important to know what those decisions are. Another one that people may or may not think about is housing. Can they stay in their home? Whether they're in let's say a single family house, is it getting to be too big? Do they want to downsize a little bit? Or if they go in, need a higher level of care, that's where a product called long-term care insurance policies come in. That would help maybe cover some of the cost of where Medicare doesn't cover a cost. And I should just clarify, Medicare covers hospital stays and doctor's appointments. There's another program called Advantage Plus that covers other incidentals and then your prescription. So that's a very high level view of Medicare, but it doesn't pay for other things. For example, your housing, if you live in assisted living, that's all considered private pay. If you need to bring in a personal care or private nursing at all, that is also private pay. So how do you pay for those expenses? And those expenses can really add up very quickly. I want to say, if you go into and kind of get into a little bit of the details here, but if you go into the hospital for, let's say, a serious illness of some sort, the hospital stay, I believe, is 14 days. And then if you have to stay and get continual care, that becomes private pay, and that can be $1,600 to $2,000 a day. So do you have the funds to be able to pay something like that for 2 or 3 months? So when you think of all the money that you've saved and you've tucked away, knowing what those costs might be is kind of it can really impact how much money you've saved for retirement. So keeping an eye on what that might be, and that kind of leads me to that financial plan of how you've saved while you've been working and raising your children. One of the things I want to share, and I'm hoping that your situation is on the higher end, is what I call the forgotten middle. And it's something I don't have explained here, but the forgotten middle is a term in the United States where we have a philosophy of caring for the poorest, which we can go into that detail. It's about being on elderly waiver. In other states, it's got another term. Medicaid is the federal term for it versus Medicare, it's Medicaid. So about 20% of our population, we want to provide housing and medical care and services for them. That's what our taxpayer money goes to cover their care. On the other end of the spectrum is those who have saved, they have plenty. They have the long-term care policies that can cover any expenses that they might have. So that is, they got everything covered. The middle is what I consider the forgotten middle. And just to put some numbers on it, just so you can kind of gauge, it's if you've tucked away for your retirement between $50,000 and I'd say $2 million, just to give yourself an idea. Obviously on the $2 million side, you probably can pay for a lot of services. So really the real sensitive part is the 50,000 to 500,000. Because at that point in time, one healthcare scare can really clean you out of a lot of your retirement savings very quickly. If you have, that would be like a month of long-term care. So those are some of the numbers. So I think sometimes people need to know what are the parameters, and to go, okay, maybe I need to be putting away a little bit more now because the costs are going up. I mean, we've seen obviously inflation seems to be the topic of the day with how much things cost. And then staffing, how much you have to pay to get a quality person in to provide care if you need that. Mm-hmm. And then I believe, so those are the real big concerns at retirement. What do you need to do? One final thing I would like to say is when you've been working, you've had probably a employee assistance program to handle the little things that you're not thinking about, eyeglasses, prescription drugs, those little, things that we have in our life. When you retire, all that support basically disappears. And people don't realize that there is no employee assistance program for retirees. That's kind of what I'm doing. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote the Last Life Lesson book, is to talk about all these individual subjects, kind of list out what some of the options are, give some high level details about each of the topics, whether it's like we talked about earlier, healthcare directives, a little bit about wills and trusts, to Medicare and what is Medicare. And let me tell you, it's its own conversation. Yeah. And it's complicated. I'll be the first one to say it's very complicated. To funeral planning. Some people don't think about how do they, and I like to say, how do they want to celebrate their last party? Yeah. But based, of course, also on your own personal beliefs. And how are you going to stay engaged? Do you want to volunteer after you retire? Do you want to work part-time? Do you want to teach classes or read, do a reading program at your local school? So again, that whole idea of what are you going to do to fill your time in your day and how are you going to stay active? Those are the conversations that maybe people don't really have. But again, this might be those conversations you can bring up to your family members when you're having those weekly meetings or however often you stay in touch, and to say, okay, are you staying engaged? Are you, how is that song that you're writing or that woodworking project going, that that they're staying engaged and they're staying active and they're having conversations with people who are also involved in the same thing.
So that's again something that we all know, that purpose in life or even just simple socializing is so important, irrespective of your age, but more so as we age, because now we have more time to think about these things. And so a lot of good questions come up. One thing you mentioned something about elderly waiver. Can you just quickly tell us what that refers to?
So in Minnesota, that's the term we call it, elderly waiver. Other states have other terms for it. It's basically a program where the county will cover your housing and your medical expenses that's not covered by Medicare. Now, to qualify, you basically have to be bankrupt. You can't have as a couple, I think it's $120,000 plus your house. So when it comes to like personal assets, things of that nature, it really is hard to qualify. Obviously, if you have $120,000, you're like, yeah, you're fine. The concern is when you're alone, you have to spend down to $3,000 that you have in your name aside from your house. Mm-hmm. And maybe, I think your funeral expenses. I'm not sure about a car or a vehicle, but for the most part, your investments, your savings has to be gone for you to qualify. And then you also have to have been able to reach that without giving away all your money, what they call the 5-year look back. So they look at all your finances for 5 years. And if you've sent out a birthday present, that would disqualify you. I'm just using that. That's the level of when they say your care needs to be for yourself, not for anybody else, no gifting. Mm-hmm. So it's actually a really high level to reach to get to that, because truly it's really there for the people who have always been on support for their entire lives. It's, you see, yeah. So
you mentioned about aging alone, and I think that's the most dreaded idea that everyone has, that, what if I'm alone when I'm older and there's nobody in my family who can support me, or I have to live on my own? What are some of the options when it comes to aging alone?
Well, first of all, they did the census in 2020, actually looked at this question, and they discovered that those who are over the age of 55, 20% of the population of Americans are going to be aging alone. They're not married. They do not have children. So this isn't even people who are living away from family, although I would put them in this group too. But this is physically, they don't have those family relationships there that they can lean on. So this is definitely a very hot topic right now of how are we caring for and preparing for what I call solo seniors, or that's kind of the industry term, is a solo senior. In truth, one is it takes a lot of creativity and a lot of, really making sure you have a network of people. So where you would expect your family to come by, maybe it's you have your you play, people, I wouldn't say go the people that you go and have a beer with down at the pub, but like a group of friends, and you agree to look out for each other. One of the things I've heard that is very effective is friends, they actually make sure that they text each other every morning. Not so much say, okay, I'm okay, but they have their little connection. They just stay in touch all the time. But housing is going to be a concern, whether you live in an apartment or maybe the idea of getting a roommate is not a bad idea. Some people are also looking at co-housing. And with co-housing, what they mean is you may have your house, but you'll bring in a young family who, in lieu of rent, they will do maintenance and take care of things. And then another, which I'm promoting in my book, The Last Life Lesson, is what I call a family caregiving agreement. What that is, instead of hiring a third-party company to come in and be your personal care, you can hire out different jobs to the people that you know and trust. So it could be for the neighbor that's down the hall or down the street. They can come and walk your dog, or they can, do some simple housekeeping, just so there's that connection within the community. To, you have someone who comes in and you get a pedicure, and that's, you make an agreement. You're going to come and give me pedicures once every 2 weeks. And and that might be your secret way of saying, okay, I have diabetes, so I know foot care is super important, but that's how I negotiate that I have someone looking after that.
And
you know,
so do these people get paid then? You pay them to do these services?
that's what that's what the agreement is. So this isn't a contract with anybody. This is where you say, okay, it's a personal arrangement. I will pay you $20 for the pedicure. I'm just picking on that. Or, you have a neighbor who says, okay, I'll go grocery shopping. And you say, okay, well, then I'll make meals, come over for dinner. So you come up with a way that you work that out. Now, if you want to hire somebody, you can do that, especially if you have a family member. So one of the things that happens oftentimes as people get older, they want to lean on their family members. When you get that multi-generational home, and maybe one of them cannot work because you need that much care, you can arrange to pay them. And this is, I know people go, why would I pay my children? That should be something I give for free. I understand that. The thing is, they're not earning an income and your other siblings are. So they have no income, they have no benefits or potentially limited benefits and no retirement savings. So it's a way you can transfer your assets for your care while they're still alive. And that's so valuable. Meanwhile, the other family members who are busy with family or work or whatever the situation might be, they understand that caregiving is not just something that my sister needs to do. And I'm just going to pick on the sister because that typically is who gets to do it, right? Not understanding she doesn't have an income coming in. And a matter of fact, she's probably spending down some of her life savings. So she's being put into a position where she's going to be, it's not equal. So by doing that, you can say, okay, I will pay. Now, one little, I don't want to call it a trick, but we have a guideline that in the United States, you can gift up to $16,000 per person. So that's a great way to say, okay, if my grandkids come over, I can gift my grandkids $16,000 to maybe go walk my pet, go for a walk with me, make sure I'm getting exercise, or make sure I have a light meal. Again, checking in, making sure someone's getting good, nutritious food. That can be a unique way of going, okay, and then I'm gifting, so they have money for college or to start a business or, for their own needs. So it doesn't have to just be the adult children, it can be the grandchildren, or, it could be if you're alone, it could be the neighbor down the street.
Okay, or it could be a friend.
Absolutely. And so, you could do it in trade, or you could actually physically hand them cash. But to do that, one, you need a record of care. So there's proof of what's happening. Because again, going back to that elderly waiver, if you need to qualify for that, this isn't gifting unless you do gift it. But if there is a record of care that gives that proof to those who are, manage that program, to realize this was physically for your care. It also is a great way for your family members to also know what's going on. So there's that communication that naturally happens. So there's some,
So what you're describing is something that needs to be done proactively and not wait until you are so so much in need of help or so dependent that you are not able to manage these things. So this is a good information to have so you can plan it accordingly. The agreements are in place and you know what you're doing.
And likewise, then it's not all on one person to do everything. So the different family members can then come alongside and help out. Now, granted, yes, if you are in another city or another state, that's going to be hard to do. But maybe you say, okay, mom and dad can't pay that. Let me see if I can find a way to help you out financially. Again, it's about pulling people together to have this conversation. Again, I'm not discounting, you get excellent guidance from the caregiving companies that provide these services. And oftentimes they make great respite, because caregiving, and this is something that you don't talk about until it's too late, caregiving is a really hard job. Okay, we think of how hard was it raising little children. Now imagine raising your parents. It's a 24-hour-a-day job. it's not like I can send them and put them, send them away. I mean, but that's where like adult daycare is another great option. And that's a program where, seniors get some interaction, they get some exercise, they get a good meal at a senior center, or sometimes even actually in an assisted living home, but they don't stay overnight. They're just there for the daytime. So you can do work or you can get a break yourself. So those are some other considerations that really come in handy for those who are aging alone.
So what you're saying is basically that conversation needs to be ongoing. It's not one and done conversation.
Right.
And now, again, we are focusing on 55 plus. And as you described in the healthcare directive piece, that, sometimes emergencies come and you are not ready. And, suddenly a family member passes away and the spouse or the kids, or they realize that, oh, we don't have information about their passwords or their bank information, or how are we going to manage all these things. So again, talking about proactive conversations, can you touch upon what are some of the documents or information that we need to have in order and let our immediate family members know, so in case of emergency, they have the necessary information?
So what I'm going to do immediately first is that is part of the Last Life Lesson book, is after every chapter, I have a checklist. So if I forget a few things, it'll be in the checklist. And you bring up a really good point. Passwords, banking information, your assets, maybe what their value is if you happen to have an appraisal, your funeral plans. And ideally your funeral is already paid for, so your children don't have to figure out how to pay for it. Now, or you can do a prepaid plan, or you can do where you set aside the funds and make that available to whoever you authorize to manage your funeral. Another thing also, and this is really what it comes down to, is in your will, in your trust, is you have to identify who will close out your estate. So when you think of that, what documents are needed to close out your estate, that is really what you're looking for. And it could be anything from your bank accounts, paying your bills, paying your taxes, to closing out your social media accounts, or filling out the paperwork for the immigration. If you're not a naturalized citizen, you will have to file with immigration documents. And how does that get closed out? So it's a way more complicated, way more entailed process than just making sure that you have a way to downsize your home. Yes, so this is off my website. It's on the resources tab. I have a lot of the documents here, and you'll see where I have like a password manager. A funeral planner is great because it can tell you how much things might cost. Now, granted, this is from last year, so the numbers might be a little outdated. The family schedule, that might be really helpful for your family. It's who's going to do what when. So we always know that there's someone always stopping in and being with family members. I have a asset list, which again, that's a way to maybe go room by room, and maybe you take pictures, or you identify who you want to receive something. It's a favorite picture, it's a blanket, it's the silverware, those things that you collect over time, who would get that, so that can be gifted to them. The record of care is what we talked about before with the family caregiving agreement. A really important document to gather is the what should my family know? And this is where you literally write down names, phone numbers, the actual details of what do you need? What is in your it keeps going.
Yeah.
So here you go. Who do you need to know?
So we hardly think of putting this down and putting it somewhere safe. We're always scrambling at the last minute to get all these things. So it's a good idea to have everything in place.
Yeah. and even something simple as I just saw like social security numbers of people. Okay, you might not know your children's social security number, but boy, if they have that, sometimes that's exactly what's needed for your, if you have like anyone you want to gift any money to, that's how that's all passed through. Who to contact, who's going to take care of your pets. If you have a pet, where do you want them to go? Safety deposit box. One of the things, actually, this is one of the things I picked up right away is when I was talking to my banker, they said that, we're actually the first person that most companies call, or when someone learns that they lost their loved ones, the first phone call is to the banker. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
It's probably like, okay, is there money in my name? I mean, it's all about the inheritance. No, it's because people have to go, how do I pay for the funeral? How do I do that? Or is there a safety deposit box? And what people don't realize is if you don't have the key for the safety deposit box, you have to go to the court and get an order. So then the bank can drill out the safety deposit box to open it up. So there's little things like this that are just, if you don't think about it, you just don't know.
Yeah. I'm looking at this, and you have this section called final wishes, which again, a very difficult conversation to have or even to think of for yourself, right? You always feel, this is for later, but you never know when that later is going to be now. So according to, like, as you know, in India, 80% of people are Hindus. And according to the Hindus, we cremate, and after that ashes are to be disposed of, or wherever they need to be dispersed. And that will be a good way. This will be a good way for people to make their wishes known to their family in terms of what they want to do, if they are here, if they want their ashes to be taken back home, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. And that is the greatest gift. When I talk to family members and they go, I didn't have to think about what to do, I just had to follow the wishes. That actual act of describing what this looks like for you is the best gift you can give to somebody.
Yeah.
And follow what your wishes are, not necessarily what obviously you have, certain religious, like you said, with the Hindi faith, there's going to be certain things that you would expect to do. One of the reasons why, I'm just going to back up, the reason why I called my book Last Life Lesson, it's based on a Christian Bible book that says a son doesn't know what to do unless the father teaches him, so the son can do that also. So it's that concept of what you do, you are teaching to your future generation. So if there's cultural beliefs, faith beliefs, just respect. Your family members will go, well, this is what my parents did, so this might be what I want to do. So it's really important to be very intentional with that, what those plans
or even family traditions. Families might have certain
absolutely
traditional rituals around that time. Okay.
Absolutely. So having those written down, unless it's absolutely understood, this is what we do. But if it's in America, we're kind of losing that a little bit. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm hearing a lot of people saying, well, I'm happy with having a barbecue. And that's it. Or I don't even want anyone to be at my funeral. Just put me in the ground. No, I don't want anyone to miss me. What I like to remind people who are saying that, especially those who are aging alone, because they're isolated, they don't realize that they have that community there. They've lost that connection. How do we let them know that, no, as a community, we want to remember you. You had an impact on our lives. So how can we show ourselves how important you were to us? That's really what life and death is about. It's, that and leaving a legacy. Again, what are those life lessons you want to pass on to your grandchildren, to your community, to the people that you know, love, and trust? I mean, what is it that you think is so important about life that you have the ability to share that? Because your life has meaning. And how do we capture that?
Beautiful. I think that's a very good place to stop. And I would say, I would encourage all our viewers to get your book. So is your book available on your website?
It's available on my website. I self-published the book. So actually what I have it where it's what I call the do-it-yourself, where you can just get the book, you go through it yourself, and that's perfectly great. A lot of people go, yeah, I need a little bit more. So I'm going to show this, if you don't mind. I have a box. I could call it the black box of death, but that doesn't sound very nice.
Yeah.
And that's where you put some of your documentation. And I can, you can do the book in the box. That would be great. So you can collect and get all the documents in there. Sometimes people want to know, what do I do? How do I fill out these forms? For that, it's not on my website yet. This is something people are giving me the feedback. This is something that would help them. So for like an hour, I could sit down with you and walk with you through what documents need to be gathered. And, you can try to do all that on your own. The next level up is where you want to have me sit down with you and keep you accountable and really go through filling out the documents and kind of thinking through the whole experience of what do you want this to look like? And it's about a 6 to 8 month process because you need time to sit and think and do it. But that's where at the end of that, you will have a full plan that obviously you can modify, but at least then it's done. You have everything completed. And then the final piece that I do is for those who want to do the family caregiving agreement. And that's where you get where you're paying somebody and you're doing the record of care. It helps to have a third party kind of oversee things to continue to advise and to guide and bring in advisors if needed. If you're looking for someone to help you with an insurance policy or the attorneys, connecting you in with those people who can make those decisions for you. That's really what I'm designing my business to be, is kind of like a concierge type service for your family for this period of time, because it's nice just to have someone else. And then with that mediation background I have with family members, working through those hard, difficult conversations that sometimes pop up with family members.
No, this is a wonderful resource and this is great work that you're doing. So I would encourage people to go to your website to get all this information, ourfamilyencounter.com. Amy, thank you so much for coming to talk to us for these 2 sessions. We have got this immense information. I hope people put it to good use. And once again, thank you.
Thank you.